The message on the answering machine filled Marcus McKinley with even more fear than he already felt, as if that were possible. Perrin's voice was shaky as she said, "Dad, I'm all right. Please tell Jerry McFarland that the people who kidnapped us tried to kill us. Thanks to Jeff's ability, we got away. Tell him Ames and his partner, Dr. Stanford Brandeis, are behind it. The two of them are partners with something called the Yata..." There was a pause in the message while Marcus heard Perrin conferring with Jeff on the pronunciation. "They're partners with the Yataka 8 on the Solar Laser Amplification Project. Also, have Jerry check Brandeis' association with a Dutch industrialist and a German munitions manufacturer on the Chancellor Project. Then tell the world that Jeff and I will demonstrate at the Washington Monument at Monday noon." Marcus picked up the phone, punched Jerry McFarland's number, and placed the receiver to his ear. The phone was dead, and someone was knocking on the front door. "We'll stop them before they get to Washington," said the man in black to Senator Charles Ames. They were sitting in the study of the senator's Washington, D.C. home. "That's a confident statement from somebody that couldn't neutralize two handcuffed civilians," Ames snarled in response. "He probably used his girlfriend's earring as a weapon. This time we'll shoot first." Ames was shaking his head as he stood up and walked slowly to the window. The Sunday morning pre-dawn lights silhouetted the naked trees lining the snow-covered ridge behind the house. Driving a stolen Ford Tempo, Jeff and Perrin pulled into a roadside diner on the western edge of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at 8 a.m. "2 black coffees and 2 orders of hotcakes," Perrin said to the tired-eyed counterman. "He looks worse than we do," Jeff whispered to his lover. "Well, I got a couple hours sleep while you drove," she said. "I feel pretty good." "How much money do you have?" Jeff asked. Perrin checked her purse. $36 and change, plus Visa, American Express, and my checkbook. "They'll be monitoring credit cards," Jeff said. "They took my wallet when they booked me. It's not much. And we need a crystal, Jeff. I'm going to check the yellow pages." Jeff sipped his coffee and tried to brush away the mental cobwebs of exhaustion while Perrin scanned the phone book that hung on a wire beneath an old-fashioned dial phone on the wall. He scanned the cafe. 1950s diners were a current restaurant fad, but this one was a worn-out original and looked twice its age. A gray-haired man in bib overalls sat 3 stools away, his lunchbox at his feet. At the other end of the counter, a young black man wearing earphones bobbed up and down to an unheard beat. "The Crown Chakra opens at 10, Perrin said, swinging onto the counter stool. "They're sure to have crystals." Following breakfast, Jeff and Perrin used the cafe bathrooms to clean up as best they could. By 9:30 a.m., they were sitting in the Ford Tempo across the street from the Metaphysical Bookstore. It was located on the edge of downtown in a graceless, turn-of-the-century brick building. In the window were displays of New Age books and tapes. Faceted crystal balls hung on strings in the window, slowly turning, flashing in the reflected sunlight that bathed the front of the building. The slushy street was deserted. "I wonder how many people are hunting us," Perrin said, cuddling into Jeff for warmth and mental support. The car motor was running with the heater on, but she was still chilled. Her racing jacket wasn't intended for eastern winter wear. "Well, I'm sure we're listed as escaped prisoners, and the government is convinced we're threats to national security. Ames knows we're a threat to him. I guess every police agency in the country is on our tail, plus maybe the National Guard and the Boy Scouts." Perrin punched him playfully in the ribs as they watched a bearded young man in round glasses, a stocking cap, a navy peacoat and jeans, walked down the street toward their car. He cut across the street before reaching them and walked up the steps to the crown chakra. A moment later, he was inside and lights snapped on. "Come on," Jeff said, getting out of the car. They darted across the street and up the steps. The door was unlocked, and they entered the store. The smell of incense permeated the interior. The young man had taken off his coat and was wearing a plaid flannel shirt. He was quite tall, with a little pot belly. His beard was bushy and red. Perrin thought he looked like a fat pencil. "Morning," Jeff said. "Do you have any crystals?" The young man smiled. Perrin thought she caught a flash of recognition. "Over here." He gestured towards a large display under the side window. "I'm Harvey Tanner," he said, offering Jeff his hand. "Jeff Lafayette," he responded without thinking. "I know," Harvey said. "Did you really blow the top off the Beverly Hills City Hall with a quartz crystal?" Jeff and Perrin stiffened. "How did you... How? Good Lord, according to the news, you two are the biggest desperados since Frank and Jesse James. They're flashing your pictures on the TV every 30 minutes. The car you're driving was the only one stolen in Clarksburg after your arrival there last night, so they're even showing pictures of it." Harvey pointed out the window at the Tempo parked across the street. "Please believe us, we didn't..." "Hey," Harvey interrupted. "Yesterday when I watched the interview with your Arizona doctor telling about your Atlantis delusions, I understood." "You did?" Jeff replied. "I wish to hell I did." "You're using your Atlantean knowledge. You're trying to warn the world that what happened on the lost continent could happen again." Jeff looked at Harvey, stunned. "We've got to find the right crystal and get to Washington," Perrin said, an edge of desperation in her voice. Harvey responded with a deep, honest laugh and a smile that seemed to light up from the inside. He knelt down and opened a drawer beneath the crystal display and took out a long wooden box and handed it to Jeff. Jeff looked from Harvey to the box and carefully opened it. Inside was a foot-long jade rod carved to look like a plumed rattlesnake. Emerging from the snake's mouth was a perfect 8-inch quartz crystal. Jeff trembled in subconscious recognition. "Atlantean," Harvey said. "The style that was passed on to the Atlantean Mesoamerican settlements, the Mayans, Toltecs, and the people of Teotihuacan." Jeff slowly lifted the rod from its black velvet bed and held it to the center of his forehead. "It's yours," Harvey said. "I've always known it was meant for a special purpose." "I don't have the money to pay you now, but I must..." Harvey interrupted Jeff. "If you must, you can pay me by letting me help you." "Help us?" Perrin said in disbelief. "Yes, and we'll start by ditching that car you're driving. Far away from here, or they'll make the connection to me." "But your store," Perrin said. "You can't..." "Sure I can. I'll leave a note on the door. My customers will understand. I'm closed Mondays, so I can drive you to Washington tomorrow morning." After leaving the car in the Pittsburgh airport parking lot, Jeff and Perrin rode in Harvey's 1969 Volkswagen van back to his apartment a few blocks from the bookstore. It was a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old brownstone. Hanging from the center of the high-ceiling living room was a large pyramid. Visionary art lined the walls, and a backlighted crystal display glowed from a glass case that hung on the wall above the couch. One bedroom served as a warehouse for metaphysical books and products for the store. "Sleep now," Harvey said. "I'll take care of business, line up some fresh clothes for you, and I'll be back by dinner time." After Harvey was gone, Perrin showered while Jeff relaxed and turned on the TV. Andre Agassi was playing Boris Becker on a palm-lined tennis court. Jeff flipped past MTV, Bugs Bunny, and a couple of fundamentalist preachers until he found CNN. He almost jumped when his own picture appeared on the screen. After forcing the plane to land at this remote Ohio airfield, Jeff Lafayette used his uncanny crystal ability to sadistically punish the 2 male agents, while his girlfriend, Perrin McKinley, mercilessly beat the female agent. The camera cut to an extreme close-up of the woman's bloodied face. After a report of the incidents in Beverly Hills and at the Federal Building, a reporter standing in front of the Clarksburg Airport building appeared on the screen, microphone in hand. A reward of $50,000 is being offered for information leading to the capture and... Jeff snapped off the set and sat frozen, wondering about Harvey. He opened the box containing the jade and crystal rod, looked at it, closed the top, and opened it again. Trust, he thought. Trust. The bedroom was as black as a cave when a noise pulled Jeff out of deep sleep and away from his Atlantean teleportation lesson. Perrin was cuddled into his back, still breathing deeply. Jeff groped in the darkness for the jade rod. He couldn't remember if he'd left it under the pillow or on the bedside table. He'd thought of both places prior to falling asleep. Before he could find the rod, the door opened and a man stood silhouetted in the light from the living room. Jeff, Perrin, it's time to wake up, Harvey said. It's 8 o'clock. Dinner's ready. You're a lifesaver, Harvey, Jeff said later, eating his second veggie burger. If these aren't meat, what are they? Soybeans, vegetables, and herbal flavorings, Harvey said proudly. Jeff raised his eyebrows and looked at the burger in his hand. Perrin smiled. The feds came to visit me this afternoon, showed me your pictures, and asked me if you'd been in to buy any crystals. Did they tell you about the reward? Jeff asked. Harvey smiled. $1 million wouldn't tempt someone who accepts karma as their philosophical basis of reality. The TV news was playing in the background. 20 minutes into the meal, the Lafayette-McKinley story was replayed, but there was no mention of the planned Washington Monument demonstration. If Jerry McFarland got my message, the press would have that information, Perrin said. A call from here might be traced directly back to us, but I could ask one of the women I work with at the ad agency to go to a phone booth and call Jerry, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, and a few other odd TV stations. Jeff, Perrin, and Harvey were listening to a news radio station when they arrived in Washington, D.C. at 11:30 a.m. Monday morning in the Volkswagen van. For the third time, they heard the announcer say, "The Senator's solar laser generator is an experimental concept in which the rays of the sun are focused and amplified into a bank of huge quartz crystals. Until now, this privately funded project has been praised by the California State Legislature and environmentalists alike. According to Senator Ames, it offers the safe, clean energy alternative our country needs so badly. The monetary sponsor of this project is a corporation called California Laser Tech. But acting upon a tip from Perrin McKinley's lawyer, when we attempted to investigate this corporation, we found it to be funded by private philanthropic organizations that were funded by other philanthropic organizations in a circle that seems to have no end. In other words, the people behind CLT may not want us to know who they are. We are, however, investigating a connection to Dr. Stanford Brandeis and the Yataka 8, a Japanese corporation that is not allowed to do business in this country. At 9:30 this morning, Senator Ames asked for protective custody. It's rumored that he may be seeking immunity in return for his testimony on the solar laser amplification proposal and the Chancellor Project. Dr. Brandeis is out of the country and could not be reached for comment. According to unconfirmed reports, Jeff Lafayette and Perrin McKinley plan a noon demonstration at the Washington Monument. Harvey turned down the volume. You realize even if you win, you lose, he said. They'll never leave you alone. Even if the feds back off, the Russians will want to dissect your brain. I know, Jeff said. He noticed the horrified look on Perrin's face. But right now, we'd better get to the Washington Monument. It's showtime. Light snow was falling, and the Washington streets were more congested than usual because traffic was being routed away from the Washington Monument. Harvey had borrowed a sweater and warmer coat for Perrin. He'd given Jeff his winter topcoat, which was about 6 inches too long. "I don't know how we'll ever be able to repay you, Harvey," Perrin said, squeezing his shoulder. "Hell, you're letting me help you save the world," Harvey replied. "That's good karma, you know." They were 3 blocks from the Washington Monument when Jeff directed Harvey to stop the car at the corner. "Harvey, thank you for everything." He offered Harvey his hand. "When Perrin and I get out of the van, I'll use the rod to generate a protective force field around us. It should protect us from anything, but I've never done it before, and I'd suggest you watch from a distance." Harvey nodded. Jeff opened the door and stepped out into the crowded street. Perrin followed and took his hand. With his right hand holding the jade and crystal rod, Jeff closed his eyes and focused upon a protective aura. The quartz crystal glowed and hummed as a blue light emerged from the tip to form a ball of shimmering, translucent blue light around the couple. Perrin turned to see Harvey still sitting behind the wheel of his van, his eyes wide and his mouth open. "We'll be back to visit you in Pittsburgh, Harvey. I promise." "Let's go," Jeff said, gently tugging at her hand. The first people who noticed them just stared. Then someone screamed and the commotion started. People were running away from them or towards them. "What's weird about a man and a woman walking down the street inside a big blue force field?" Jeff said and laughed. The people who tried to reach them bounced off the force field as if it were a plate glass window. A businessman in a suit stood to the side and rubbed his injured head. Everyone was yelling at once. "What you gonna do?" screeched an old woman. "Zap the president while you're at it," yelled a middle-aged blue-collar laborer. "Come on, man, let me in there with you," said a black kid on a bicycle. At the corner, a policeman darted out of a doorway and stood, legs spread, planted firmly on the sidewalk in front of the couple. "Jeff Lafayette and Perry McKinley are under arrest," he shouted. Jeff and Perrin continued to walk towards him. He put up his hand to touch the force field and was forced back as a couple inched forward. "Stop, damn it!" he shouted again, drawing his nightstick from his belt. When the couple continued walking, the policeman swung the baton at the shimmering ball of light. The shock of hitting the force field stung the cop's hand so badly he dropped the baton. It was instantly picked up by the kid on the bicycle, who sped off through the crowd with his prize. Across the street, from the entrance to the Washington Monument Mall, a dozen police and hundreds of screaming, pushing people surrounded them, forcing a slowed pace to avoid crushing others as they forced their way through the throng. A truck with a TV unit on top was parked by the curb. Perrin waved at the cameraman. The police helped to shove people out of their path. As they crossed the street, Jeff and Perrin saw a line of patrol cars forming a wall that blocked the entrance to the mall. The police directed the couple between an opening in the cars and allowed them to enter the expanse that led to the monument. Swirling blue and red cherry lights swept over the scene and reflected in the luminous force field. Squawking radios drowned out the sound of the crowd. A dozen manned TV cameras were in place. 200 yards ahead stood a group of people. Beyond them was the Washington Monument, a gleaming white marble obelisk 555 feet high, topped with a solid aluminum capstone. Perrin was trembling so violently she leaned on Jeff for support. "This way," said a policeman as he walked to the left of the force field, guiding them down the mall toward the group of people. At 100 yards, Perrin realized that her mother and father and Jerry McFarland were standing with police, soldiers, and men dressed in suits and wearing topcoats. Her mother waved. Perrin waved and blew a kiss. Jerry McFarland, accompanied by a man on his left and right, stepped forward and walked to within 5 feet of the force field. "Perrin, Jeff, I'm so glad you're all right." Jerry gestured toward the tall, gray-haired man standing to his right. "This is Robert Wellington, the Attorney General of the United States, and the gentleman on my left is Federal Judge Thornton Blackstone." The Attorney General spoke. "I have to ask you to give yourselves up. We're already investigating the connection between Senator Ames and Dr. Brandeis. At this time, you're only guilty of destroying Beverly Hills property. And we have some questions about your encounter on the plane from Los Angeles. Perrin interrupted. Your agents were on that plane. Someone called them and ordered us murdered. If that's what happened, we'll find out about it, the Attorney General said. We've been in custody once. Not again, thank you, Jeff replied. Well, you don't have much choice, young man. The mall is surrounded by a force that will easily penetrate that light bubble. Please, the judge said to Jeff and Perrin, I'll personally guarantee your safety and force an investigation. Judge, Mr. Attorney General, Mr. McFarland, be realistic. We have no intention of surrendering for rather obvious reasons. I want access to the TV networks at the entrance to the mall. Absolutely not, replied the Attorney General. Jeff locked eyes with Robert Wellington as he raised the throbbing crystal rod toward the capstone of the Washington Monument. I want to say a few words, then we'll leave peacefully, Jeff said softly. The Attorney General raised his right hand, and rows of policemen outfitted for battle immediately appeared. An armored vehicle used to break down the doors of crack houses roared into the mall and advanced to within 20 yards of the force field. The three men began to back away. Perrin called out to Jerry McFarland. Are my mom and dad okay? Jerry sputtered, Yes. Tell them I disappeared, but Jeff and I will be back soon to visit. Jeff aimed the crystal at the monument capstone and willed the crackling beam of energy to fire into the air as sizzling lightning, the sound echoing through the mall like hissing electrical static. The three men turned and began to run. The Attorney General stumbled, fell, stood up, and turned to scream, Fire! From all sides, guns roared and bullets ricocheted off the force field. The armored vehicle burned rubber, grabbing for traction as it lurched forward, running full speed at the force field. It rammed the shimmering ball of light with a crumpling thud that caved in the front of the vehicle and released a stream of whining radiator steam. As Jeff held the crystal rod steady, the aluminum capstone began to melt, dribbling like frosting oozing down the sides of the monument. Attack! Someone screamed, and an army of men assaulted the force field with handguns and knives. Jeff lowered his arm and smiled at the crazed faces of the attacking policemen. When they eventually realized the futility of their efforts, they backed away, looking dismayed. Jeff and Perrin turned and walked back to the mall entrance and the television cameras. Does someone have a microphone that will be heard by all? Jeff called out. A young woman quickly ran a cordless microphone to within a foot of the force field, laid it on the ground, and returned to her position behind a camera. Jeff reached through the field, picked it up, and held it to his lips as the cameras dollied in on the couple. Behind them, the flat-topped monument glistened in the winter sun. I apologize for destroying public property, but it was the only way to make you listen, Jeff said. What you have just seen is a minor demonstration of the power of the human mind directed through a crystal amplifier. This was a common ability on the lost continent of Atlantis, where I lived in another life 28,000 years ago, as you perceive time. The concept of reincarnation is real. It was edited out of the Christian Bible. But if enough people demand that it be accepted, church government will manage to fit it back into their teachings. In fact, they'll find that karma explains the injustice and inequality in the world. The awareness will enhance their other teachings and make them more viable. My initial demonstration in Beverly Hills was to draw attention to the solar laser amplification project planned for the San Joaquin Valley. The dangers of such a project far exceeds that of the nuclear power plants you already fear. Solar laser amplification destroyed Atlantis, and it could destroy the United States if you allow it to be developed. So stop all solar laser explorations and stop the other destructive practices that are destroying our world. We must save the greenhouse layer. Stop polluting the air and the groundwater. Stop the ozone depletion and resolve the hazardous waste and acid rain problems. None of this will happen unless we get involved. Do your part and demand that our government acts. George Washington said, "Our cause is noble. It is the cause of mankind. Now surely the most noble cause is to save this planet. Get involved. Jeff turned away from the cameras to face the Washington Monument. He aimed the crystal at the obelisk, and a burst of blue energy shot from the tip of the crystal and exploded into the marble. White chips flew into the air, scattering like glistening rain over the mall as the laser beam cut giant letters sideways up the face of the monument, forming the words, "Get involved." When it was done, Jeff took Perrin in his arms and kissed her tenderly. "I always wanted to play to a huge audience," he whispered. "When it finally happens, I don't have my guitar." As the cameras cut to a close-up of the lovers, the couple slowly faded and disappeared. When Perrin opened her eyes, she was descending from billowing clouds toward a gleaming white city. They landed gently on their feet in a garden of fruit trees, ferns, and rose bushes. A low wall enclosed a manicured courtyard, a bubbling fountain, and a reflective pool. "Teleportation, the only way to fly," Jeff said. They walked hand in hand through the garden arches into their new home.